Now there was a little bit more carbon buildup on this piston head than that, but not a big lot. But I used, like there's a piece right there, but I used this blade, and I just, without pressing hard, I just sort of, you know, took off what I could, and then you just saw me use the brass. That's a brass wire wheel. Anyway, I'm about to put the cylinder head, or the jug, about to put the cylinder jug back on here. So one of the things you might want to do is you know, download a manual if you can find a manual free online, or something to help you just make sure you don't forget anything as you're putting it back on. Anyway, I just cleaned up the piston head here to make sure it's ready to go. Now if you look carefully, here's the rings. The rings are all in good shape. You can see there's a split in the ring, of course, because the ring has to be able to fit down over here. And when the rings go into the jug and the jug goes on, those will compress in and go like that. Now, as you're putting them on, it is important that we put that this gap right here, it can't be just anywhere on the piston. They usually suggest a certain place for it. So that's part of the reason why I downloaded the manual. And as you can see, the manual will tell you how these rings, how the gaps should be in terms of the piston itself once you orientate it. But the problem is, if you look at this, this says exhaust up here and intake. And you look at this, if you're not careful, the exhaust on this one is actually down this way. Even though this manual is for this bike, you think they would have put it the right way around, as most people be working on the engine this way. So in order for me to put these gaps here in the proper place, I sort of want to take the diagram upside down. And that's the way they should be. Okay, so it tells you like the top ring, you want the top ring up here where the intake is. So this is where the gap in that ring should be. So that's actually this top ring, and this top ring is right here. This is where the intake, this is where the carburetor would be, so that's the intake. So that's where you want the gap in that ring to be. And then the other two rings, the second ring and the lower, what we call the oil ring or compression ring, got to be at 120 degrees off here. So that's what, about like, you know, 4 o'clock, and this is more like about 8 o'clock or something, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock right there. So just think of it as a clock, and that's the easiest way to do it. So as long as I got one of the second ring down, it could be the second ring, it could be the compression ring, doesn't matter. As long as I got them somewhere off like this. This little arrow right here on your piston, that should point towards the exhaust. I didn't take the piston off this one, so I didn't need to reorientate the piston anyway when I put it back on. But if I did, this arrow should point, if you got to put your piston on it should point towards the exhaust. So I'm going to use this diagram. I'll put my top ring up here where the intake is, and then these other two gaps I'm going to offset from where the exhaust comes out directly at the bottom. And as we're looking at it this way, imagining this is 12 o'clock and this is 6 o'clock, I can get a good idea without using a protractor and everything where I should put the other rings. Okay, so what I'm going to do, is the top ring is here. I'm going to leave it there. The second ring, the gap is actually right here. So now I'm going to move it either with my finger or I'm using this little screwdriver. I'm just going to slowly move this around. There it goes. I'm going to orientate this gap. So that gap is somewhere around here. So I'm going to leave that gap there. I'm going to leave this one at 12 o'clock. And now I'm going to make sure that this compression ring, and it's a little harder to see the gap in this compression ring here, or oil ring. People call them different things, but it's right here on this particular ring. So I'm going to move that around this way and put it down in this area here. So, you know, I'm not going to be overly, you know, it's good to be particular. Some people are very anal about this stuff, but you know, I got one roughly around here and one roughly around here, and then the top ring, they want to straight on from the intake. Okay, so that's how I'm going to orient those rings. Now I got to try to put this jug on over here once I put my gasket on. Now the gasket that goes on here, it has writing on one side and not on the other. So from what I understand, from all the things I've read and seen, you want to put this on with the writing up. So it'll be going on this way now in a second when I put it down there. And I do always like to have, again, a little bit of oil on hand. This is just regular motor oil. And so what I'll do is I like to get the surfaces here wet with a little bit of motor oil, and then I'll put this in place. I got to feed the timing chain up through there, make sure it doesn't come off the gear on the bottom, especially since I got the side cover. Especially since I got the side cover and everything back on there now. So I don't want to lose this off the sprocket on the bottom. And then before I put the jug on, I'm going to oil up the piston as well and make sure my rings are where they are. Now again, there are two locating pins here that you want to make sure are in this here, ready to go down. So they'll fit around this one and this one down here. So you want to make sure of that. Now we have the feed, the timing chain has got to be able to fit up through here and then rest up in here and not be lost back down through there. So I just use a bit of old wire and hook it up. Then once it's up there, I just want to make sure it's not going to go back down. So I do that. And now this is the trickiest part. I got to try to get this into the jug. I got to be able to feed these rings in through there. And I don't have one of those ring compressors. So I got to do this by hand, you know, as best I can. Again, I like keeping a little screwdriver on hand, but nothing that's going to gouge or put any marks in it. I just want to be able to feed this down there as best I can and get those rings compressed and up into the jug. So I'm just taking my time, not forcing anything. And if I got to compress it a little bit more, I will. There we go. So that's the first one in.